Hello everybody and welcome to Emsi webinars. Today we're really excited to be joined by Will Cookson, who is Emsi Burning Glass's UK Director of Communities and Government. And we have a special guest today, Sajid Butt from Southampton City Council. If you have any questions during the course of the webinar, please put them in the questions box on your control panel and we will endeavour to get back to those at the end of the presentation. If not, we will follow up afterwards. You will get a follow-up email with the webinar slides and the recording after we finished, so keep your eyes open for that. It will also include the link to the Economy Insight dashboard if you want to go and have a little look or apply for access to it. So without any further ado, I'll hand over to you, Will. Hi, Will.
Hi, Debbie, and greetings to everyone that's joined us today. Really good to have Sajid with us. This is the second of the webinars that we've had looking at the Economy Insight dashboard, but quite different to the first one. The first one was an introduction as we launched the new product, and this one is really to get a customer perspective. So that's why we've invited along Sajid. So yes, for anyone that hasn't joined us before, quick introduction to Emsi Burning Glass. We are an organisation that is operating globally, but in terms of our UK operations, we work with a whole range of organisations, including local government, local enterprise partnerships, colleges, and obviously universities, as well as employers. Our vision is to be the global authority on the labour market and leading that transition to a future of work based on skills and capabilities, which is something I'm sure we'll return to today. And our mission is to drive economic prosperity and mobility by providing the insights needed to build and develop people, institutions, companies and communities. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. As I said, there was a previous webinar where we went through in some detail about the functionality of the dashboard. Today's webinar is much more about a customer's perspective and of how it can be used and what policy drivers are sitting around at present that this could be applied to. But yes, in summary, it's a simple interactive dashboard designed to help organisations understand trends, make priorities and identify opportunities within the local labour market. It's been designed that it can be shared with a wide range of stakeholders. It doesn't need a lot of explanation, it's simple to use, and we've identified 3 use cases. There may be more, but we've got 3. So one is to track recovery as we come out of the into a post-pandemic landscape, but just generally in terms of economic disruption, tight labour markets, to be able to track that is important. And then to validate priorities, understand which sectors give your area the best chance of growth, and how you can prioritise those potentially for investment or for particular interventions. And then finally to evidence decisions, and that might be ensuring that strategic priorities and interventions are essentially based on a solid evidence base for the local labour market. So that need, and I won't labour this, but that need that we identified is quite interesting in that we identified that need to be able to monitor economic disruption, understand and look at meaningful comparisons. The dashboard allows you to benchmark your area against another comparable area, and we think there's a real value in that because you can obviously learn from other areas and also draw comparisons as where you may have strengths or weaknesses. It's different to our other tools. Many of our existing customers have access to our analyst tool, which, as the name would give away, is far more analytical in its approach in terms of it's far more detailed in terms of the line of inquiry that you can take, and it needs further explanation, whereas what we've tried to do with the dashboard is make it easily understood by a broad range or broad audience. And then again, this is probably a theme we'll come back to, but this needs to support collaboration around an evidence base. And if you think of some of the policy drivers that are out there at the moment, be it the local skills improvement plans, levelling up, and the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, they all require a place-based approach. It's not any one organisation that's going to achieve those or other goals in isolation. Before I introduce Sajid, I just wanted to do a bit of a reminder, really, in terms of how Emsi Burning Glass, or as we were, Emsi, have connected in with Southampton City Council. Initially, we had conversations, myself and Sajid, back in 2019, which technically is 3 years ago, but feels like a lot longer, as I'm sure it does to all of you. And we connected in around understanding industry cluster or sector strengths within Southampton. That very quickly, as you'd imagine, moved into looking into COVID-19 and the impact of that on Southampton. We completed an assessment report, which was shared and used across the council. We then provided data to support, skills data in particular, to support the Cities of Learning projects, which I'm sure Sajid will talk more about. 2021, Southampton became an analyst customer, and then in 2022 became a customer, the first customer, I think, to use our Economy Insight dashboard. So time to introduce Sajid Butt, the Strategic Skills Manager at Southampton City Council. As you'll have seen from the previous slide, I've known Sajid for a good while. I've always been impressed by his ability to connect people across different organisations. He's made some really important introductions for us as an organisation. Fundamentally, he is driven and focused and passionate about influencing the employment and skills agenda to benefit Southampton residents. And I think I sold this as a lively discussion, so I'm hoping that's what we're going to have. I've got some questions that I want to ask Sajid. I'm sure if you're listening in, you may well do, and as Debbie mentioned at the top of the webinar, you can raise those in the panel on the right-hand side of the webinar tool. So Sajid, are you there?
Well, hello, I'm here, and I'm a little bit embarrassed by that. I haven't had my appraisal yet, so I'm glad this is being recorded, so I can send it on to my line manager.
It's been recorded. So you don't believe how good I am as well. It's been recorded. You can use it as you wish. But yeah, it's all true for the record.
Brilliant. Thank you, and congratulations on finding a picture of me as well.
Yeah, no problem at all. The Southampton skyline there. Which was, I should give credit, that's Michael Tomset created this fine piece of art, familiar to anyone that's been to Southampton, I'd hope. I thought I'd start with a really simple question, Sajid. I'm keen to know why labour market information is important to Southampton City Council.
Well, and everybody, good morning. Well, it was a no-brainer for me when I started because it was a new role for the council, looking at the skills mix strategically. And so I've never really felt, to be honest, in all my years working in the realm of economic development regeneration, I've really had my finger on the pulse when it comes to skills, really understanding what's happening now. I mean, reports will always tell you what's happening, but that's from a historic perspective, that's from a snapshot in a period of time. So by the time a report or briefing comes out, you maybe 3, 6, 9 months, down online anyway. So it's very important for me, new to the council, new to this role, to really have a better grasp of what's happening here and now, and understanding better some of the occupational trends, the sectoral trends happening in and around the city, and how that should really influence what we do as a service area and what we do as a council vis-a-vis skills, and how that influences things around community learning, our work around the apprenticeships, and other wider economic development initiatives as well.
I think it's interesting as well. You made an interesting point there of the importance of real-time insight, and also that need to be able to understand skills. I mean, obviously those are things that we've talked about at length, but could you elaborate on why skills are particularly important in terms of your role, and I guess what your ambition is in regards to using skills insight to influence the wider work across Southampton?
So, yeah, certainly. Well, I mean, look, skills has always been a critical component to economic growth. Okay, economic growth, productivity, inclusion, social mobility, but more so since the pandemic as well. And I guess when you have an opportunity to actually look at what's happening within the economy, understand what is the occupational trends, sectoral trends, things around job postings, how you compare with other areas at a real-time level, then you can sense check that against what historic data, what qualitative data is telling you as well. So when you can bring a richer layer of information, a more contextual layer of information to discussions, to the decision-making process, and it creates new avenues for collaboration, new ideas in terms of projects, and also ways in which you can refine current initiatives as well to make sure that they are actually having the desired impact as well. So, you know, when we begin to see skills, not just in terms of people, but in terms of the wider productivity mix, wider mix around economic growth, then, you know, you can begin to thread skills, you know, through a range of different policy initiatives, policy drivers at the same time. And that's when we're talking about the skills ecosystem, and having a full grasp of the economy and really threading skills throughout that, because, you know, localities change over time with the developments, with the, you know, with investment coming in. So as the economy evolves, the requirement for skills will evolve at the same time as well. So you need to be able to have a very discursive approach, a very fluid approach to addressing the skills challenge and opportunities at the same time.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. You mentioned about particular developments. Obviously, Southampton has, and fairly recently, but might not feel like it from your perspective, but you've got a Freeport status. Can you talk a bit about what your aspirations are around the Freeport? I think that'd be really interesting to our audience.
Certainly, whether it's the Freeport or even the City of Culture, you know, these major initiatives will have a huge impact on the local and surrounding economies. So it's important for us to have a fuller grasp in terms of the job generation that's likely to take place, the skilling requirement, what's the demand for new skills, where are the kind of redeployment opportunities, how do we begin to initiate some upskilling at the same time to make sure that we have a talent pipeline that fits seamlessly into the opportunities that are being created, and there's no lag between the opportunities that employers are requesting and the supply of labour, locally or otherwise. So, you know, it's having that understanding over the phases of these particular developments and initiatives, you know, what the kind of job generation will look like, and the skilling requirements, and how we mobilise, I guess, the provider base to kind of meet those skilling requirements in a very dynamic fashion.
That's really interesting to hear. I guess the other thing that I'm aware of, and again, I think would be particularly interesting to the audience before we talk about the dashboard in particular, but more broadly, could you talk a little bit about the assistive learning project, or the future of work project, or that initiative really, and that focus, and what was gained from that work?
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, certainly. Well, I mean, if we look at, you know, so far we've been talking about the necessity of good labour market information and trying to bring some innovation into the skills mix. You know, the Future Work Initiative, which is initiated within the council itself, was an internal inquiry involving a number of experts coming in to give their view on how digitalisation and automation will affect the city economy, and how we as a city respond to that, ensuring our people and our businesses benefit from the opportunities that digitalisation and automation will create, but at the same time mitigating the risk of people feeling excluded, or businesses feeling excluded from the pace of change and developments that digitalisation and automation will bring. So from the back of that particular inquiry, which lasted a good number of months, we put together, we sketched out a number of interventions which we felt would kind of hold us well for the, over the medium to long term. So we wouldn't be having knee-jerk reactions to digitalisation and automation. From that particular future work programme, which contained a number of initiatives, one of them was Cities of Learning. And this is a particular project initiated by the RSA, the Royal Society for Arts, Manufacturing and Commerce, based in London, but they're a global network trying to do some real cool stuff to kind of break new ground and do things differently. But Cities of Learning was, in essence, a way in which you can bring both supply and demand aspects of skills together, and create skills pathways to expedite upskilling opportunities, expedite job outcomes for local residents. And within that particular project, we did a number of we undertook a couple of bespoke pieces of work. Firstly, we looked at particular trajectories that the city economy could go through, given where we were at the height of the pandemic, given the kind of opportunities that the Freeport and city culture could potentially generate, and what the kind of skills and I guess the skills and jobs implications would be for the city and how we respond to that. And that piece of work is something that we will look to revise and rehearse with colleagues at the time as particular initiatives like Freeport and City of Culture hopefully take off. The second aspect within Cities of Learning project was around a skills framework, and obviously using Emsi burning glass data, looking at qualitative data around skill needs and demand, looking at best practice elsewhere from countries like Singapore. We wanted to put together a skills framework which would highlight what the exact skill requirements from employers actually are, and looking again at some of the sectoral needs around digital, marine, maritime, creative and culture, looking at some of the occupational trends, and then trying to really put together some composite skills assessment for those particular sectors, as well as skills per se in the city. And the reason being is, sometimes, like I said earlier on, when it comes to skills and you're looking at both supply and demand, and when you're looking at how skills affect an economy, you want to be talking a common language. You want to have a common understanding. It's like one person says potato, the other person says tomato, and you're none the wiser as a result. So the skills framework itself was a way to really bring different parts of this skills ecosystem together: employers, providers, and obviously intermediaries working in the middle, trying to broker solutions for residents and businesses. So when you have a common language around skills, when you have a common understanding what the skill needs are now and going forward in terms of trends, and sectorally what kind of nuances we need to be considering, then it helps employers in terms of workforce planning. It helps providers ensuring that their provision is fit for purpose, but also helps intermediaries in terms of intermediaries by way of people brokering solutions. It helps to then make sure that we mitigate the risk of the skills jobs mismatch as well, and we can better plan for the future and collaborate much better around skills going forward, particularly in the realm of the LSIPs, the local skills improvement plans. The skills framework is one way of really coalescing around a common way of doing it. And I guess the third aspect around the Cities of Learning project really is a pretty funky tool called Navigator, which will highlight the provision across the city, the learning provision across the city, and I guess this within that, the skills that are associated with the particular provision on offer. And crucially, within this particular platform, it will have a live jobs feed coming in from the bid sales, and with that live jobs feed, we'll have skills tags on the applications coming in, on job vacancies coming in. So any resident coming into this particular platform called Navigator will understand the provision on offer and the skills that are being generated, have a look at, be fully aware of the job opportunities being generated in around the Southampton area and the skills requirement, and ensure that the provision that they're taking up is closely aligned to the jobs being generated within the city and surrounding area. and that way we can then curate pathways, skills enriched pathways from the individual to the opportunities that exist. And I guess that's one example that we're trying to do in the future. We're trying to do something different, because we know for a long time the skills ecosystem isn't fully functioning. So we've intervened, put some thought to it, invested some money into capitalising a new way of thinking and doing at the same time.
Yeah, and you're really, I think, at the forefront of bringing together technological solutions, but also understanding the value of that insight that can be drawn primarily from job postings in terms of defining employers' skills needs, but then also the individual defining their skills needs, and that match between the two is obviously absolutely critical to, as you know, your ultimate goal, which is to ensure that residents benefit from these opportunities at a local level. We talked kind of broadly around the context. You've got lots going on. I was quite interested, because you know what we provide. You've seen our different offerings. You're an analyst customer. You have recently taken on the Economy Insight Dashboard. I'd be really interested to get your early views on it, just in terms of how you see it being deployed across Southampton, and how it fits with the broader activity that you've described.
Well, again, it's just an additional tool that we can tap into. We've obviously got analysts, and that's got a number of different layers, provides a layer of complexity when you're looking at data analytics and skills analytics. But the dashboard itself, you know, is a high-level snapshot into what's happening now. It kind of, when I first had a look at it, it was a good provided, I guess, a sense check for our own growth ambitions. You know, so for example, in our pursuit to be a greener city and whatnot, really have an idea in terms of with regards to the investment coming in to make in our ambition towards net zero. You know, to what extent, you know, are we seeing a growth, for example, in green jobs being generated, or green skills, you know, being demanded from employers? And I guess, you know, for those who aren't that tech savvy, it's quite easy. It's quite, you know, it's a bit of eye candy for the non-tech folk out there. So it makes it a lot easier to navigate your way around things with, you know, a number of, you know, simple clicks, and you have a complete understanding what's happening right now. And obviously, analysts provides a lot more layer of detail for those that require sophisticated understanding around the skills mix. But I guess, you know, for me, I guess given the pace at which things are happening, you know, we've got a number of, you know, for everybody, I'm sure, in this call, and who will hopefully watch afterwards, there's a number of competing, you know, policy priorities out there, a number of different funding initiatives. Everyone needs a strong, rich evidence base, and the dashboard, you know, gives you that without having to, you know, read through reams of research or having to go back into yesteryear to understand, you know, put together, you know, your business case. So I think, you know, the dashboard, along with analysts and obviously the data out there, you just need to have a composite understanding what's happening, and make sure that your business case for funding and investment stacks up. And particularly, you know, when you're having, you know, when you're in the process of trying to attract investment and speak with investors and whatnot, or in local businesses, you know, having something like the dashboard just gives you, you know, the current status in terms of what's happening in the economy.
Yeah, and I think that's really well, it's pleasing to hear, because obviously that was what we were trying to tap into, and to be able to provide that headline view. I mean, it ties in with what you said right at the start, which is you saw the value of labour market information being primarily about what's not the historic view as much as what's happening in the here and now. And as we all know, disruption and pace of change more broadly preceding the, you know, pandemic. I know we connected in talking about automation, I think, right at the start of our conversations. Sorry, Will. No, go on.
I was going to say just on that one. I mean, if you recall, I guess during the pandemic itself, when we had you produced the COVID-19 report, one particular infographic was around job postings and the claimant count. You know, and the particular infographic showed the quite dramatic drop in job postings for Southampton and a significant spike in claimant count. So anyone looking at that particular infographic would realise we've got to try and stem the tide of businesses having to let people go. So, for example, are they maximising the furlough scheme out there? Firstly, secondly, how are we supporting businesses that are on the edge, you know, in very vulnerable sectors, to actually have a kind of agile plan to hit the restart, you know, hit the recovery button as soon as, you know, restrictions are lifted. You know, how do we support people that are severely affected, you know, from this and falling out? So it gave us almost like a bit of a reality check that, you know, whilst we all knew the impact that COVID was having around businesses and residents, clearly an infographic like that just helps everyone sharpen the lens a bit more in terms of what needs to be done in the here and now, and to make sure that we're doing everything possible to keep businesses going, but to support residents back into work as quickly as possible at the same time. So that's where, again, you know, that real-time data, you know, and having a finger on the pulse really can make a difference.
No, absolutely agree, and I think we saw a change in the perception of job postings through that period, because that was how you could see how things were tracking in real time, whereas obviously the structural data obviously is important in terms of understanding more broadly what you know, if you want to look at job counts, you'll go to the structural data to understand how many people are employed within a particular sector or industry or occupation. But there's going to be a obvious lag to getting that data, because it's essentially coming from official government sources, and it's survey based, which takes time to come through, whereas the job posting is real, in real time. I guess one thing I just wanted to mention, it'll probably be our final one, because this time is flying by, but I wanted to ask you, you know, I introduced you as a connector, someone that connects people. I thought you'd be really well placed to answer a question in regards to how do you go about initiating collaboration with stakeholders. And I guess the context for that is everything that is out there at the moment, be it the levelling up agenda, be it the local skills improvement plans, the shared prosperity fund. It's all going to require collaboration across a wide range of stakeholders across a defined place. And I just wondered what you could share in terms of the approach you take to collaboration, I guess more broadly, that Southampton City Council takes.
Again, you're too kind with your words, but I mean, I'm sure there are people on the call here this webinar who are far more adept at collaboration than I am. But look, at the end of the day, as the poet John Donne said, no man is an island. And you know, the days of flying hand solo are well and truly gone. So you're in an area where by collaborating, you can achieve a lot more, and as they say. And so I think, you know, a couple of examples spring to mind. You know, on the one hand, that you've got to go with an open mind. Okay, no one entity has got the sole solution, and when in joining up and collaborating, you can achieve a lot more. Look at the multiple impacts and outcomes, and again, use skills as a thread that cuts through different policy agendas. Our partnership with DWP, for example, is an example of that, and we were one of the first unity councils in the country to have a strategic partnership with DWP, which looked at how you begin to deliver real innovation at the local level, combining both local authority and DWP efforts to improve skill and job outcomes for residents. Not that skills is a particular priority objective for DWP itself, because they're obviously involved in their main mantra is getting people into work. But by combining our efforts, we've been able to achieve a lot more. One example being our work with DWP in supporting the resettlement of refugees from Afghanistan. And so a call came in and said, look, we need to do some more to support, these refugees, this very vulnerable community in settling, in Southampton. We need some support around English language skills. I said, well, look, we can't really do that, but if we were able to tie in what you need from an ESOL perspective, what we're focusing on in terms of digital skills, then we've got a shot at doing something collaboratively. And through that, what we've been able to then pilot with DWP is actually to take a cohort of Afghani refugees through the government's essential digital skills framework.
Yeah. And
for those of you who don't know, that essential digital skills framework is broken down into 3 stages. I think essential digital skills or foundational digital skills or life digital skills, one of the 3. Secondly, around life digital skills, and thirdly, around work digital skills. So there's 3 stages. So what we're doing is actually taking this group through those 3 stages with ESOL, with more intensive ESOL support, job readiness support, and then we're credentialising that provision as well. So we're actually issuing digital badges, digital credentials to show the skills that this cohort are picking up, and then matching that and using then the DWP work coaches to hopefully then get them into work at the same time. And that's just one example of collaboration, which is responsive, which is agile, which actually meets current need at the same time. Another example around collaboration is the work that my esteemed colleague Jodie Fair is doing around the Southern Apprenticeship and Skills Hub and the sister project over in the EM3 region, the Apprenticeship and Skills Hub in partnership with Hampshire County Council. So again, a collaborative effort involving the council. As I mentioned, Hampshire, there's obviously Portsmouth, and others. Work with provider networks in Surrey and in Hampshire and Isle of Wight, the universities, and obviously employee representative, employer groups such as the Chambers of Commerce as well. And through having that cognizant understanding, who is needed to complement delivery, who is needed to actually achieve the outcomes that we want, we've achieved some phenomenal results across both regions. And my hats off to Jodie and her team, and obviously all our partners involved in that project as well. A clear example of that of collaboration and where it's important. When you put aside your own individual institutional goals and look at the bigger picture and work towards that high level outcome, high level vision, and again you can achieve a lot more. So that's the way to go.
I think that's a great place to leave the discussion. Sajid, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been we could I think we'll have to do a follow-up because there's plenty more that we didn't get to, but I really appreciate you finding the time and sharing your thoughts and your experiences with our audience today.
Thank you, Mel, and thank everybody for tuning in.
So I just want to check, Debbie, do we have any questions?
Thank you first of all, thank you very much for that, because that was really informative. Really enjoyed that. Just one question: does the Economy Insight dashboard contain skills and labour market data on Northern Ireland councils and sub-regions? That's just a quick general question.
Yes, it does. The answer. Yes, it does. So we at Emsi Burning Glass, we have full data set, be it job postings or structural data for all of the UK, including Northern Ireland. So do reach out if you'd like to find out more about that. But yes, it does. I'll move on.
Will.
Yes.
Sorry, not to throw a curveball into the mix, but just
what have we got?
No. Just in terms of collaboration going forward, I mean, there's obviously, like you said, you've mentioned a few things about leveling up and UK prosperity fund, but beyond that, I guess the big thing that's always there is around, the transition to net zero. What that looks and feels like. And I guess if we were going to do something genuinely transformational, that was going to hit all the buttons when it comes to productivity, upskilling, business growth, social mobility, economic equity, civic empowerment, you name it, net zero is the way to go. Now, I think, you know, it gives us enough of a time frame, the whole 2050 target, for us to actually critically look at what's it going to take for us to hit that particular ambition beyond the big infrastructure investment coming into EV charging points and whatnot, and solar panels. You know, what are the different interventions over the next 20, 30 years that we, 20 odd years that we need to be focusing on? What are the financial levers that we need to draw down? What are then the kind of upskilling and supply chain opportunities that we need to be focusing on? What jobs have been created? How do those jobs evolve over time? So there's a lot of design systems thinking that needs to be going on. And for all my esteemed colleagues involved in economic development, regeneration, either from policy or practitioner level, that's where I think we really need to have a bit of a meeting of hearts and minds to look at potential for cross-border activity and really begin to draw down the necessary investment and also the intellectual capital that resides in our organisations to make it happen at the same time. I think it's a big opportunity, and you know, if one thing we need to accept is that in making that transition to net zero to 2050, the economic paradigm of our localities will need to change as well. It can't be based upon the current economic paradigm. Our economic paradigm for the future is going to be based upon our green credentials, on net zero, on the circular economy, whatever other label on the sustainability agenda you want to tackle it, that is going to be the future. So the quicker we mobilise our efforts around that, build our own internal capacity and capability to work towards that from a strategic design and operational perspective, the quicker hopefully we can put together some real transformational projects and really make an improvement to people's lives, as well as stimulate new forms of wealth creation and give people that opportunity to upskill and grow and live healthier lives. Sorry.
You don't have to say sorry at all. I'm really pleased that you threw that one in, and I do think it's really common. It's not. It is something that is coming up in lots of our conversations with people across communities and government, and I think it's well worthy of giving some airtime to. So I'm glad you raised that. And I did start by saying how ambitious you are. There's a big ambition that you're absolutely, yeah. So
thank you.
Thank you again for joining us. Thanks for throwing in that curveball at the end, which I think is really relevant. Just to mention a couple of things, Debbie mentioned at the start, if you want to have a play with the demo site, you can do. There's a web link which will be shared out in the follow-up email, and you can get access and have a play with the tool itself. Just wanted to mention a couple of webinars towards the end of this month. I've got a really interesting one in our Levelling Up series that's really looking at local partnerships. So it does chime with what Sajid was talking about today. We've got a nice guest coming along to, a good guest speaker coming along to that, or a number of guest speakers. And I think that will be really well worth attending. So do register for that, and you can get to that through the Emsi Burning Glass website. And then there's a further webinar, which is very much looking at the local skills improvement plan Trailblazer for the Leicester and Leicestershire area. And this was done by East Midlands Chamber. And you'll see here that we've got a number of speakers. We've got Chris Hobson, Director of Policy and External Affairs from East Midlands Chambers of Commerce, who'll be taking us through the Trailblazer, what their findings were, and the innovative approach that they took. We've also got Andrew Cropley, the CEO of West Notts College, and I'll be joined by my esteemed colleague, Ben Owen, who's the Director for Further Education. And then not yet on this, but confirmed, we also have Spencer Moore from the Chartered Institute for the Management of Sport and Physical Activity. So that's been another kind of panel-based discussion, but really looking at the findings from the East Midlands Chamber, who led on the Local Skills Improvement Plan Trailblazer for Leicester and Leicestershire. And that's it for today. Thank you all for joining us. Do register for those other webinars and do have a play with the dashboard tool, and come back to me if you've got any questions.